Credo che possiamo incominciare. Penso che anche la persona più atea del mondo
I think we can start. And I think that even the most distrustful and the strongest atheist in this world cannot deny that Jesus Christ has been one of the major events in history.
della sua nascita. Don Giussani diceva che la parola
Don Giussani used to say that the closest word to the word event is the word chance, by chance, something that just happens without no specific reason. Now, for what reason a chance becomes an event? It is an event when all the things get together. Why was it for me that meeting with Don Giussani has become an event? Because it has recomposed my needs, my problems. I mean, it has put all the parts of my life together. And this putting together creates certainty, creates the awareness that life is just by chance, but at the same time it's not like, it's not casual. It was intended to be so. The title of today's conference, which is also the title of the exhibition, Through the Eyes of the Apostles, it's an overwhelming presence. They met Jesus and their entire life was overwhelmed. Why? Because they never heard anything like that. To solve the problems of their life, to fulfill their needs, but through the eyes of the apostles, something that they saw, not something that they had imagined, not something that they had read. It's something that they actually saw. A real fact, a fact of life, a fact of history, intertwined with other facts. Obviously, there is a common thread that unites all the facts between themselves, otherwise there would be no history. On the contrary, Jesus and the entire Christian experience is the fact of history, which is there to unify and put together all the facts of history, the good ones and the bad ones, the joyful encounters and the tsunamis. Everything gets together, everything is reunited, and the present time that we are going through is a precipitate, a condensation of this red thread uniting all of these factors. Why? Because the present has to find its reasons, and the reasons of the present are something that is taking place now, but in connection to something that took place previously with a hope for what will happen next. Without history, without a conscience of the origin of things, the present cannot even exist, cannot educate, cannot justify itself. Exactly like history, unless it is linked to a present event, it is of no interest. It's archaeology, it's the study of ancient things, but it is not the study of why things are related to each other. Therefore, something which takes place in the present cannot really unite, cannot bring people together. That's why we are attached to the title of this meeting, what it is related to, the experience of the two speakers. They are here to talk to us about something which is present, but has also to do with what happened previously. If you think about the introduction made by Don Garcia, so Jesus fulfilled the promise in the sense that also Jesus would make a meaning out of his life, thinking of where he would come from. That's why the Church entrusted the Holy Land, which is the land of Christ, to a guardian, because Those are the places where these things happen, and we can learn what we are learning today. That's why in the seminary religious schools there are people that study the Gospels, that interpret all of these holy writings, because we come from that history. Don Giussani, Father Giussani used to say that Jesus hit Peter and down, so on and on and on, down to my mother, who gave birth to me. And now Father Pizzaballa, who is the guardian, the responsible of the Holy Land. You know that it's not an easy area, it's a troubled area, crisis, warfare. And then we shall listen to Father Manuel Garcia, the professor of Exegesis at the Faculty of Theology at the University of Madrid.
È sempre molto bello e impressionante vedere un numero così alto di persone e cose.
It's always nice and interesting and very emotional to hear somebody speaking about Capernaum. Now, stranger, usually I'm never invited to talk about the Middle East, to talk about the Holy Land, the presence of the Christians in those areas. I think usually this time I've been asked to talk about something different, something which is not easy. I have been asked to give my own testimony, to talk about myself, to talk about my own personal experience, to talk about Capernaum, but also about my own experience of faith in Christ, to see that how this experience is related to my experience as a Franciscan friar in the Holy Land. And this gives me anxiety to some extent, because all the other experiences obliges me to make a synthesis, to summarize, therefore to go to the heart of the relationship that is at the basis of what I do, of my steps in the Holy Land. So the meeting is certainly the opportunity to redefine the circumstances and to redefine my own personal relationship with certainty, with Christ, on the basis of that school of concreteness, of something semi-concrete, which is Capernaum and the Holy Land. Now, living a life of faith through the eyes of the apostles, for myself as a Franciscan, is to start out of that conviction that that we can see and encounter in an immense certainty, because this certainty has already existed at that time and in that specific region. So what is my experience of Christ? What Capernaum now, heap of rubble, and how is it that that land can nourish and nurture my relationship with Christ and my life as a Christian? Not easy, not an easy question, but I would like to start from a faraway place, not Jerusalem, not Nazareth, and not even Capernaum, the Garden of Eden. Now, I want to reassure you, I'm not going to tell you the whole stories ever since the Garden of Eden, but in the book of the Genesis there is a reshit, a beginning, that is to say, not just what comes prior to anything else, but also to announce the first intention which was at the heart of God when he decides to create the world and men. So God is a God for men and with men, with us, the human beings. Maybe we are today capax Dei because God decided he wants to be capax hominis, therefore like us and like the world. So fundamentally, the first truth that is given to us in the book of Genesis is that we were created for this encounter, for this relationship, for this harmonious and full relationship. But then we all know how history went. There is the factor, there is sin. And sin tells us that life does not simply lie in this relationship between man and God. Think of the snake, the serpent, so there's something outside of it. And with Adam and Eve, men understood this doubt. So what was fully real, God, man, and their relationship, is then marked by doubt. And then a life which has to be reinvented every day from scratch because man no longer knows God, and we all need salvation, and we all experience that we, the people, need salvation. And here I move on to St. Mark's Gospel. I would like to talk to you about a personal experience, but before doing that, I have to tell you my own personal experience of Capernaum, starting from the first chapter of St. Mark's Gospel. The Gospel, which is also present at the exhibition, it is very much present in the exhibition. There are many pages in that Gospel that deal with Capernaum, not just one single episode. It is mentioned in the Gospel that when John Baptist was arrested, Jesus starts his preaching activities and goes to Capernaum. And Matthew, in his Gospel, said that Jesus actually settled down in Capernaum. And we were told that Jesus comes to live in this fragmented and hurt land, which was highly inhospitable, and he does it quite normally, quite simply, leading the ordinary life with the people that were living there. Now, I would like to dwell just briefly on this aspect, which is interesting. In Capernaum, you can see the streets on which God actually walked. We see the house of Peter. We can understand how life at the time was. We can find the kitchen with the ovens, the floors, the stairways. We see the thatched roofs. And in those houses, there is certainty. There was also the house of Jesus. We can actually see that the happy few can actually go there and touch it on the banks of the Sea of Galilee. Now, for them, it is not so much an emotional or theoretical experience. Jesus was there among them in the same houses. And the signs which disrupted their life took place there, where they were leading their normal life. And the town, after the presence of Jesus, was profoundly changed, also architecturally completely changed. But let's go back to St. Mark's Gospel. Let me take the first day of Jesus, subdivided in 4 parts. It was a Saturday celebrating the feast of God's love for men. So 4 important moments. We've all seen it in the exhibition. Jesus goes into the synagogue and starts talking, and they're all astonished. Well, who is this man talking with such authoritativeness? So they were all astonished, all amazed. But then, besides Jesus' voice, there was the voice of the devil. Somebody possessed by the devil comes in and starts shouting his own truth with his own voice. And this man, possessed by the devil, was saying, "Who are you? What have you got to do with us? Please go away, disappear. You have nothing to do with us. You shouldn't be here." So the devil starts shouting his own truth, his own victory, and tells you are far away because you are here. And if you are here to destroy us. But then Jesus tells this man, "Shut up, go out." So whenever the word is spoken, then the evil must go away. And there we have the question of all the bystanders, and the question who is this man? Who is this man speaking in this way? Who is able to bring the evil to silence? Maybe it's God in disguise. And then a second moment, Jesus goes into Peter's house. I mean, this is not exegesis, this is just to understand. Then you'll understand better in a moment. Then he goes out of the synagogue, goes into Peter's house, and he heals the grandmother who was in bed with high temperature. So Jesus goes to live in another fracture, the one that divides man in his most intimate relationships. And then in the evening, after dusk, all the town, all the people were there in front of Jesus' home with all the sick, all their suffering, all their distress. They were all there waiting for Jesus. So Jesus had gone to the synagogue and explaining how to heal the relationship with God. Then went into the house and treated men in his most intimate relationships. And then, third episode, once these two things are done, then the entire village all together in a new solidarity and in a new suffering in front of Jesus. And then there's a fourth moment. Jesus disappears. He escapes during the night and goes to pray. When they realize, they're all astonished, and they go and tell him, oh, everybody's looking for you. And he says, well, I had to go. I cannot stay all the time here in Capernaum. I have to go to other places. I have to go to elsewhere, because Capernaum is just the beginning. It's the beginning of the experience, and I have to go elsewhere. And this elsewhere is especially his Father. In praying him, Jesus brings us back to that encounter. So this is an example. This is one page, one single page, but there are many other things. Just to tell you how I personally interpret Capernaum, just to tell you that Capernaum, in my opinion, is evidence of the fact that the Holy Land is still the place of encounter with God. We can encounter God every single day, living our life in an open relationship with God. In Capernaum, we can see that there is again a place, a location of encounter between Him and us in the simple daily life, exactly as it was Capernaum, the oil press, the ordinary street, the ordinary life on the streets, etc., than the normal life of ordinary people. And ordinary life, is the only possible encounter with God. And when I say life, I don't refer to anything theoretical or artificial, or I mean that normal life, and we all know that life is always mixed with sin. Well, this place is the place of encounter. There is no experience of God that is not based on the drama of life of each and every one of us. So in our houses there is salvation. This is something that I saw and contemplated through the eyes of the apostles. Now, and I'm more and more convinced, not because I've understood it studying books were of no help actually, but simply because I had the opportunity of going through it, and in this sense the Holy Land is a formidable place. So, and these places do not simply have an archaeological value. Being there as a Franciscan friar, the guardians of the memory of men, obliges us to treasure the experience that these places make reference to, the place of encounter, the forgiveness, the place of encounter, as to bear witness to forgiveness. Maybe Jesus lived that place, giving concreteness to the human experience. Then we are all obliged to live in the same way as him. There is a holy land, so we have to live, to inhabit earth in a holy way. In Capernaum, the meeting with God is still possible, but unfortunately there is no encounter. I mean, we do not meet each other starting with ideas, especially if these ideas are not open to the otherness, because ideas without a life have to be defended, and the other will be an enemy that will remind you of your lack of life. But if your ideas are alive and lively, then you don't have to defend them, because they are already connected to life, and they tell the truth of your ideas. And then the meeting with the otherness and with the diversity of the other obliges one to understand better the reality of our experience. Is it only ideas, nice words, or is there something more? So living the gospel implies that one should not be afraid of the reality of life. You have to be in it without escaping, recognizing life as it is, with all its fears, but with a presence that can only be understood accepting life as it is. Well, in the Holy Land, unfortunately, there is a very painful past of violence, acts of violence even currently, that has hardly hit the local communities, social communities, religious communities, and these acts of violence between communities can be used as the only criterion to interpret those places. Now, for a Franciscan friar, I am a Franciscan, living the gospel in the Holy Land and staying there implies breaking that vicious circle of fear and violence, bearing witness to the salvation. I have already been saved, I have already been rescued, I have already been through that experience. Sometimes we have a very vague and abstract idea of salvation. We think that salvation will come one day, sometime, and waiting for that we do what we can. But this is not salvation in the Christian terms. The pages in the Gospel about Capernaum talk to us about a very concrete salvation of a God that can inhabit the spaces of our life, of our daily lives. And this becomes the path of your own encounter with Him. There's nothing to be invented. So if faith is not this, so unless it is something concrete and unless it is going through life together with the Lord, unless you have your eyes are attentive to the history and to changing your own existence, then the reality will be a threat. This is what we can learn from Capernaum. Now, unfortunately, I have too little time, so I have to gradually go to a conclusion, but I would like to talk to you about my own personal experience. Now, I moved to the Holy Land about 20 years ago, and initially, the first years in Jerusalem, my contact with the non-Catholic and non-Christian churches was limited to a simple bumping into each other on the street with the Hebrews, the Jews, the Muslims, the other churches. Obviously, I was aware of the different traditions, the different cultures. There were no particular encounter except the usual people that you meet in the street, and that is so common in Jerusalem. People blessing you, people hurting you, people spitting on you, people want to talk to you. I mean, in Jerusalem you meet different religions, but my life was very normal, and I had no particular opportunities of dialogue with different religions. I was there living in my own personal little world, which had always belonged to myself, Christian, Catholic, and religious men. I had my doubts, obviously raising my doubts, and would give myself my own responses. I was then sent to study in the Jewish University of Jerusalem. That was my first exposure to a new, completely new reality. Obviously, I was studying the Bible. What else could I have studied? So I was in the Department of Biblical Studies of the Jewish University, where everybody was religious to some extent. At that time, I was the only Christian. Now it's different, but at that time, I was the only Christian in the entire department. After the initial difficulties and clashes, true friendships began to emerge, and during those long discussions, I immediately found out that we didn't have a common language. I mean, not the general language, but the way of thinking, the concepts, the way I would talk about my faith. Now, being the only Christian, really, everybody wanted to know whom I was, what I was doing, but I was unable to convey the message, but not because I didn't have the words, but because we were coming from completely different words. The Trinity, the Incarnation, the Eucharist, forgiveness, social life, family, all of these concepts were completely strange to the others, or they were interpreted completely different by the others. The concept of the Messiah or messianicity, we all take that for granted by now, but it wasn't like that for them. And also the way we interpret history, the Old Testament, that we always say we have it in common. and we can interpret it differently. But gradually I understood that my reflection upon Christ, they were all interested in my own experience. Well, my reflection, I was unable to convey my own reflection. My experience, on the contrary, was conveyable. Now, at that time, the other people were all coming from the settlements occupied by Israel or had to do with that war, and their own experience of faith in connection with the Bible had led them to strong choices also, not necessary to be shared with in political terms. I wasn't at all hostile. I was just curious about their attitude. So, what was my own experience of Christ, and how could I talk to them in a comprehensible way? Until then, I had always lived in an ecclesiastical and Christian way, and my way of thinking was a reflection of that world. It was more than evident that together with this effort of communication, I also needed an effort of purification of of my motivation. So it was then, for the first time, that I concretely understood what we mean by to bear witness or to give a testimony. Testimony can only become real and when you make an effort to convey it. There is no experience without testimony, and no testimony that can be locked in itself. That moment was really a strengthening of my vocation. The contact and the dialogue with the Jewish world forced me to reinterpret my own experience, compare it with that of other people, and share it in an unprecedented way. I was talking to Christ to people who wouldn't accept Christ as the Lord. But this was not a dividing factor. On the contrary, it would make us stronger together. We were reading together the New Testament. There's joint reading that we would do together. Some would come from far away, and I wasn't the initiator. They insisted on coming, and then they would draft parallels with their own religions. And also, I was also critical to some extent, and sometimes I expressed my criticism reference to their church, maybe, and they would be embarrassed because they loved Israel and they expected me to love the church. Internal questions were of no interest. So my testimony was also a need that they felt. So I had many encounters, all equally intense, and this profoundly changed my own personal relationship with Jesus. Now, the things that remain to be done are still the same, but now I look at them differently. Those encounters have led me to take a completely new personal decision in view of Jesus. I can say that thanks to those friends, I have met a new Jesus, much more intimate, in a new way. And currently, today, in the town of Capernaum, how do we meet Christ? Well, I'm not always necessarily ready and available for the encounter, but I know that now I have some reference points. We all have our own reference points. And I have at least three: the word and prayer, of course, the place, the holy place, and the people. Taken all together, of course, because relationship with the place, with the location, is in memory of the events that are in the Bible, and relationship with people obliges you to test the truthfulness and the truth of your experience, which is only true if you compare it with relationship. Relationship in the Holy Land are never easy, have never been easy, but in those difficult relationships you can find your daily provocation in your relationship with God, and then everything becomes concrete, difficult, and necessary. Forgiveness, gratuity, freedom, patience, reception, welcome, etc. All of these are not theoretical aspects. They become concrete, and you can either accept it or not. And in conclusion, I would like to say the following. As Franciscan friars in the Holy Land, we do more or less what all the others do. We're not different in any way. We pray, we study, we are involved in archaeology, we welcome people, we attempt to do some business, so we buy things, we sell things, etc. Normal life, and exactly as all the other people do. But the meaning of what we do is not what we do in itself, but rather the possibility that we have of loving our own lives, knowing that every life is possible thanks to the presence of God. It's the sacrament of an encounter. And the end of what we do, I would like to say this to the memories friends, is not the outcome, but rather the relationship, the encounter, the gospel of the presence, the fact that we are there. And thanks to the encounter with this land, we receive the grace of a real experience with Christ. We've all received somebody who spoke to us about Him, our parents, our family, but this becomes immaterial unless there is an important move passage to concrete and real experience. Exactly like John and the apostles, we must be able to say, I was there, I touched, and I listened to, and I made an experience. And this is something that you can't possibly escape in the Holy Land, because the words are not enough, or maybe there are too many words. What remains is the concrete experience of going down to the bottom of our own humanity, beyond the simple path of truth. So we're doing exactly the same things that all the others are doing. We're in no way better or worse, but we have a certainty. Certainty that the Lord continues to walk along the path of man, a history which is certainly tiring, but highly precious. That's why we are there, we stay there with an attempt of working for salvation, our own personal salvation, something that is important for every single man. That's why we're keeping our doors open, exactly as open as Peter's house was, who welcomed Jesus, and which is in his memory that we are doing the same.
Garcia.
Non so quanti di voi.
I don't know how many of you could see the exhibition we are presenting here today. I saw it yesterday when I arrived here at the meeting in Rimini. Even if I am its curator, I wasn't able to work at the setting up of the exhibition because the preparation of the World's Youth Day celebrated in Madrid last week required me to stay in my diocese, so I couldn't see the setting up of the exhibition physically. Certainly, I thought a lot, I worked a lot at the exhibition, either alone or with the friends together with whom I thought of this exhibition. It's impossible to mention all those that contributed to the exhibition, but let me at least mention two of them. Without their help, it would be impossible to make this exhibition. Erasmo Fignini and Maurizio Pellucci. Thanks to both of them. Certainly, I imagined this exhibition many, many times in my mind, of course, in my thought. But seeing the exhibition was a different thing, and I saw it yesterday. I felt the same surprise that, according to the scriptures, God had when, after deciding to create the world and the man, saw the whole of the universe. The Genesis says God saw what he had accomplished, and thought it was a very good thing. I also got moved in front of what my eyes saw. It was really very nice. I was attracted by the fascination of the reconstruction, the pictures, the images, the faces of people. They were all happy with the results, and also listening to the account of the facts that had taken place these days. The facts, reality, have a strength which not even the nicest images or ideas have. I was moved in front of this exhibition, and I was 100 times more intensely moved than when I imagined the exhibition in my mind. And I remembered Rete's sentence, "Green is the eternal tree of life." Indeed, there is a big difference between thinking of something, imagining something, and the reality. What strikes you, what attracts you, what changes you is the real, the reality, not your thought. It's always a presence, not an abstraction. During the World's Youth Days, I understood more, I increasingly understood that Christianity is something which occurs now, in this very moment, here and now. Inevitably, it is reduced to a remembrance, a memory, an idea, or perhaps a good project, but it's not Christianity, the fact that the presence of God imposes itself. This presence can be recognized because it corresponds to what we're looking for. It is a presence which goes beyond our skepticism and despair, like many young people were able to experiment in Madrid. It was terribly hot, and they could stand there for many hours waiting for an old man aged 84 in an impressive silence. It was clear that in that old man they were waiting for somebody else, Jesus. In fact, Jesus went towards them through the testimony and the words of the Pope, and also through the testimony of other Christians of their age, or through the beauty of the Church, which is found in many social and cultural manifestations. You can experience Christianity only as a contemporary of Christ, as in the experience of Giovanni Andrea, or as the experience of Giovanni and Andrea now. Otherwise, Christianity falls apart and we are alone with nothing. These days, at the World's Youth Day and my arrival here at the meeting, helped me understand the mystery of incarnation, which is the true content of this exhibition titled Through the Eyes of the Apostles, because the whole exhibition is just a reverberation, a small reverberation of that Jew called Jesus of Nazareth. It wants to be helpful to look at the most extraordinary event in human history, the mystery of God made visible. The infinite became a finite being. This is the Christian announcement from the origin, as you clearly understand from these words of Apostle John. What was right from the beginning, what we have heard, what we have seen through our eyes, what we have looked at, and what our hands have touched, that is the word of the life, is what we are announcing to you. We are announcing the eternal life, which was made visible to us. The Catholic Church has ever since bore witness to this genius aspect of God who wanted to communicate himself through or to mankind through a human presence. Please consider this statement for a while. God becomes visible, unveils himself, and saves us. So our life becomes really true through a presence which is human. This is too strong not to feel shivers in our heart. A human face is God's face. Human culture, the world of today, refuse or reject more than anything else that God became flesh and became a human person. What is supernatural cannot intervene with the human history. Indeed, there are books bearing testimony to these facts. The historical value of these books is a logical consequence of an ideological choice and study. In the first pages of Jesus' life, written by Renan, testify that he refuses to believe that the Gospels were testimony of of occurred facts, because in them you have tales of miracles where there is testimony of the divine intervention in history. And I quote, "The miracles told by the Gospels have no reality. The miracles never happen. Only those that believe everything can believe the miracles. You can't quote a miracle which occurred in front of witnesses that could demonstrate the occurrence of these miracles. So if you admit that there is something supernatural, you are outside science. You admit an aspiration that physicists, chemists, astronomists, physiologists do without, and also, therefore, historians must do without this. We reject what is supernatural for the same reason that we reject, for example, the centaurs. The reason being that we have never seen them. Not because it was demonstrated that the evangelists do not deserve absolute credibility, that I do not admit the existence of miracles, but since they tell about miracles, I say that Gospels are legends. They may contain some history, but not all is historical. Such a radical position can be found in some publications addressing a broader audience with very low scientific value. Exegesis is normally not that gross. Some subjects, some individuals do only censor the historical value of the Gospels. They don't deny it. They prefer to talk about their value as an announcement. These books, this is what is said, are a testimony of the faith of the followers of Christ, not so much an account of the facts. In other words, these books state what the Christians believe, not what they have listened to and seen. A Christ of faith and a Jesus of history is a too long story for me to repeat it again. The exhibition was thought of and developed in consideration of the contents of the testimonies that I have referred to by Payel. These books are not an invention or a mystification. They are documents written by eyewitnesses. that are sure of their testimonies. How can one reasonably think that the early disciples of Jesus could invent all this? They were not so crazy as to go around in the world and risk their lives without being convinced that Jesus of Nazareth was not just a rabbi or a prophet, but God himself. Ancient people did not believe more than in certain things than we do at the moment. They were not more simple-minded or easily taken in than we are. Paul, for example, says that Christian preaching was considered as a scandal by the Judean and as madness by the pagans. If they indicated the crucifix as God, then something extraordinary must have appeared in front of their eyes. I imagine that without that fact, it would have been a folly for them to think that a crucified could be God. As Jews, indeed, they were reluctant to accept that a man could be identified with divinity. Something similar was felt as a terrible one because many revolts actually arose out of the refusal of this pretension, thinking that the first Christians, the early Christians, were mad means not taking seriously what they thought. To them, faith arises out of gaze. The origin of faith is in front of the historical events, in front of facts. Many scholars say that the facts told by the Gospels are the result of tales of the early Christians because they had faith in Jesus of Nazareth. Through this exhibition, we would like, first of all, to show everybody the exceptionality of that man and make everybody perceive his provocation, and this should be true for all people visiting the exhibition. Therefore, we took the Gospels seriously. Instead, for many or too many, the Gospel means learning the teaching of Jesus. Many homilies, unfortunately, are just a way to remind people of certain behaviors or defending certain values. Christianity should be about following the moral rules suggested by God. In the Gospel, there are many parables and sayings of Jesus Christ. According to these Gospel tales, Jesus spoke so much that he didn't even have time to eat. So you can't deny that Jesus had a doctrinal content, but Christianity is not the doctrine of Jesus. Christianity is Jesus himself, the relationship with him, as is clearly stated by Romano Guardini. There is no doctrine, there is no system of moral values or religious attitude or plan of life that we can detach from the person of Christ, and of which we can say this is Christianity. Christianity is himself, the same person as Jesus Christ, the category which determines action and being. Action in Christianity and being a Christian, reducing the Christian faith to the adherence to a law will be totally detached from the person of Christ and would be the same error that St. Augustine denounced. This is the occult poison of your mistake. You should follow Christ's grace in his example. Being Christian coincides with a human, fleshy relationship with God, with Jesus. In the exhibition, there is a text of Father Giussani which helped me a lot. It says, I will never be tired. When I use the word faith, I will never be tired of remembering what it means, because you don't know what it means even if you define it theologically. Faith is the recognition, the surprised, grateful, shy recognition of a presence. At the same time, it's exalting because God has come among us and is among us. To really know who Jesus is, you don't, well, the critical study is not enough. You need faith. The Pope reminded this to the young people in Quattro Vientos. Faith goes beyond empirical or historical data and can grasp the mystery of the person of Christ in all its depth. We know all too well that faith is about knowing by testimonies. It implies that you open yourself to God and to what he is saying about himself. What is it that helps us going back to this original openness? Certainly the present good, the fact of perceiving the exceptional character of that man, and also the importance of a relationship with him for the purpose of our life. But we also need a simple action, a simple gesture, which is giving. It's at the basis of 100% of our freedom. We have to actually accept the attractiveness of Jesus. During the Youth Day, this was made clear. For many days, the city of Madrid saw a flow of young people that were happy to live and grateful for the encounter with Christ. It was very nice to see them, and also reason of hope, because there are many young people who are eager to know and live. A taxi driver, and this is an anecdote, told me, I remember very well when the finals of the Champions League took place here in Madrid. The following day, Madrid was very dirty. Instead, he told me, these young people, more than 1 million of them, walking in have been walking for 4 days in all the streets and squares of Madrid, and the city is as clean as it was before. And yet, there are people that get angry because of their presence, and some people really attacked those young people with words, with very bad words. There was a great sign in front of them, but they refused to accept it. Like in the age of Jesus, they could see his miracles. It was a testimony of his power, and yet there were people who fought against him and rejected all this. Jesus puts man's freedom at stake. Reality is before us. We are provoked, but adherence comes from us, from our willingness, and we have to accept. The apostles accepted, and they have experimented something great in their lives. I hope that visiting the exhibition you can have this adherence to Christ, so that our lives become fuller, even in an unexpected way, and through him we can face the challenges of life in the certainty of the victory of the resurrected Christ.
mi sembra giusto che padre Pizzaballa e padre Garcia siano stati ringraziati con un lungo applauso perché
Now, they certainly deserved your applause. And they had they held a very interesting presentation. So now Capernaum was just I mean, I saw the house of Peter actually. It's a tiny village, dusty village. Anyway. Close to a lake, which is actually called the Sea of Galilee. It's very dry. Now, until I was a teenager, I thought that the apostles were actually fishing in the sea. Anyway, simply to say that in that world where Christianity was born, and as Father Pizzaballa said, this is really helpful to understand the value of the daily life. God that became a friend, and God which was met in the daily life. He went to Peter's house. That wasn't Babylon, that wasn't Rome, that wasn't Alexandria of Egypt. And everything started from there. And now the good custody of these places, that's why these guardians are there, including Father Pizzaballa. That's why he explained how he lives down there. Anyway, God is a friend, and friendship is to be found at home in our daily lives. That's the first important conclusion. And there is an amazing history, because this tiny, dusty place brought about a radical change. And as Father Garcia was saying, everything started from a human face. Don Giussari once said that whenever they pronounced the word Jesus, they didn't mean the same thing that we mean today. Jesus, now we think of the Church and the Pope. At that time, Jesus was simply the name of a man, and obviously he was making exceptional things. They were not necessarily gullible at that time. And I remember Potox came here a few years ago, and he told the story of a rabbi. And he said, if you are there plowing your field and somebody comes rushing saying the Messiah has arrived, just don't bother and go on plowing your field. Anyway, this human face it was able to fulfill what we want every single day. That he was able to change the entire world. Starting from a detail, he was able to change the entire world.